Hello, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the new thing I'm doing, which I haven't named yet, so that's fine. I'm excited to be doing this in the new year. I'm going to be explaining what I'm getting into a little bit, but I thought I would start us off with a Bible passage first, and let me get us started here. So, what I wanted to meditate on today was this passage from Isaiah 43 because it's very appropriate. It says, "This is what the Lord says, He who made a way through the sea, a path through the mighty waters, who drew out the chariots and horses, the army and reinforcements together, and they lay there, never to rise again, extinguished, snuffed out like a wick. Forget the former things. Do not dwell on the past. See, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs up. Do you not perceive it? I am making a way in the wilderness and streams in the wasteland. The wild animals honor me, the jackals and the owls, because I provide water in the wilderness and streams in the wasteland to give drink to my people, my chosen, the people I formed for myself, that they may proclaim my praise." So this is an important one for me to choose today because I am doing a new thing. And I think it's always important to remind us that the Lord is always working in new ways in order to bring himself glory. Not saying that I'm the Lord or whatever, but in this passage, right, you see that God begins in Isaiah here by recounting what he has done for Israel in the past. He's clearly drawing from the Exodus narrative here, where he is talking about how he saved them from the horses and chariots of Pharaoh and stuff like that. And he's saying, well, do not dwell on the past, right? I'm doing something new. And that's my message I'm bringing to you, right? As Christians, we need to not be afraid to do that because I am doing something new today. I'm doing whatever this new show that I'm doing is. I'm excited to do it. Now, I don't know if I want to call it a show because I don't want to commit to anything like that, but a new thing. Maybe that's what I'll call it. Why not? And so what this is basically like my old theologues, but all together in one longer video. And that we're going to do on Thursdays, because one of the things I continually found frustrating as I would do theologues is sometimes with the recording of them, because it's not always quiet or like available, around to do this type of stuff. And also, like, I would do a topic on Tuesday, and then something would crop up later in the week, and I'd be like, man, I wish I talked about that. So I ended up moving all of it to Tuesday, where I can kind of just do whatever I want to talk about, and a mailbag and a little Bible devotional, just like I started with today, all in one kind of neat thing at the end of the week, a new thing, if you will. And so I'm excited to get into this and do it. I mean, like, hey, if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. It's not the end of the world. I'll give it a shot for a year and then reassess. We're never stuck in stone. And this one's going to be different as well because this is going to be live. My hope eventually is just to actually do this live from YouTube and not record a video, edit it down, and upload it, but just simply like upload it immediately, like live stream it. That's the hope. But we'll see how that turns out. I don't want to promise that ahead of time. But that means that there's going to be like noise in the background. I'm actually here at 7 o'clock right now at church in the morning, so there isn't any noise right now. But in the future, I'll probably be doing this at like 9 a.m. on a Thursday, and so the food pantry will be going. But I actually think that might not be a terrible thing because it'll give you an idea of kind of like what it looks like when things are going on around here. So, and it'll have a fun live recording atmosphere if that happens. So I'm excited for that. So I wanted to talk a little bit about, that God is a God not of change, right? He doesn't himself change, but he calls us to continually see the new ways that he's working in the world. And this doesn't mean like, I used to work in the Bible and now I work in the Book of Mormon or something like that. That's not what God is saying. And in this passage from Isaiah here, right, is all he's saying is like time goes on, new things happen, and I cause these new things and look for my hand in them. And I think that is something important to think about as we go into the new year, how God is going to act in our lives and in the lives of others, and that we should not doubt that he will. because oftentimes we think that it only has to look a certain way. But from my personal experience, I've seen that God works in a lot of different ways that we usually don't notice. So I'm excited to do this with all of you, and excited to see what the new year brings our church. So let's get into some of the things I wanted to talk about today. So first up is this. So this is a thing from Facebook, and this is not Facebook, Twitter, and this is a guy called Matt Laszlo, and he is a journalist, I suppose. And obviously, I'm sure all of you have probably heard in some form of like all the weird stuff that's going on in Capitol Hill right now between the members of Congress and the fact that McCarthy isn't getting voted in. That's not really what I'm talking about. One of the important ways, though, is that if he isn't voted in, the new people can't be sworn in because the rules haven't been established. And so I thought it was interesting when we talk about swearing an oath or the swearing of oaths that we do in government, because as you'll see here, right, he pointed out that this guy, one of the congressmen, I believe it's a congressman from California, I can't remember his name, let me look that up, congressman from California by Superman, let's see if that pulls it up. Yeah, incoming California congressman. This is Fox 9 from, I don't know, probably some local station in Los Angeles. Who is it? Let's just see. It's Robert Garcia. Here we go. Robert Garcia. He says he will proudly be sworn in on this Superman comic book, along with his picture of his parents who he lost to COVID and his citizenship certificate. And he got the Superman #1 from the Library of Congress. So that's pretty cool. So anyway, I saw this, and it made me think of just as a society, like, why do we bother going through with this, right? So like over here you can see all the different ones. This is a blurry picture. Here, let me see. Here is a little bit of one that he took. So you can see like they've labeled them. So for the Quran it just says Muslim, and then for the Tanakh it says Jewish. It has this I assume this is a Eastern Orthodox Bible. It has the Holy Bible, I guess, for generic Protestants. Hopefully the King James version. And then the Book of Mormon, I guess, is what this is. Although that looks pretty big to be the Book of Mormon. So my guess is it's the Book of Mormon, maybe the Old and New Testament, the Book of Mormon, and the Pearl of Great Price. That's what that probably looks like. But I don't know. So anyway, you have this stuff, and you can actually see that he says back in 2019, apparently they just labeled it like Muslim or something like that for the Quran, which is pretty funny. So whatever. But anyway, so this guy chose to get sworn in on a Superman #1 comic book. You also see in the back here the United States Constitution. That's usually done for people who aren't religious or whatever. And I wanted to talk about like why this happens, right? So like some of the things. So it's not like this to me. Like I'm not throwing shade at Congressman Garcia or whatever. Okay, I understand that these things are important to him, and I think that's whatever. A Superman comic book is, I guess, cool or whatever to do this on. But like, I think we should ask ourselves why. I always like to ask myself why we do stuff like this, because we so often like don't think about how like this stuff is relevant in our lives. It's like how in the courtroom, how people have to swear an oath saying they're going to tell the truth, right? And it's like, where does this come from? And I think like one of the interesting things when we talk about like people swearing an oath on the Bible or whatever is, why is that an important thing? Well, like back in the day, that used to be something you would do because you're basically saying, if I break this, God is going to break me. That's what that's saying. And I think like as we become more secular, right? This is, we have moved away from this type of thinking. It's like, what is this other than being like a nice thing to do, right? Is Superman gonna break you? I guess like the argument would be, this is like where I grab my morals from, like from my parents and from Superman. and Superman's a great like role model generally from what I remember. He seems like a good guy, right? But it's not like no one is holding you accountable here. And I think like one of the things, and again, this isn't like, oh my gosh, Robert Garcia is starting this whole thing. I think this is just a symptom of a greater problem where we've kind of lost our footing as a culture and as a society about like what roots us morally, what holds us together. And that's kind of the problem, is that this is a very good example of a reach out of that we've kind of escaped from our Christian past, right? Because the idea that you would swear on a Bible as you took your oath is that if your oath is broken, you expect God to punish you, right? And I think we're so cynical these days that we go, well, some people see like, well, either, God doesn't exist, so it's all show anyway, or they'll just say like, well, we'll cross our fingers behind our back, right, as we take an oath. I mean, I don't think many people trust politicians anyway. Probably one of the least trust groups of people on the planet. But I think that like maybe the reason that is because a lot of our politicians, regardless of what they swear on, don't really swear with the understanding that if they break these rules, they're going to be held liable by God. If you want to think of someone who did a really good job of this, like recently, not in the United States, but from what I understand in her personal life, was the Queen of England. One of the things that she apparently took very seriously and talked quite a bit about in private was her role as head of the church. That was like the biggest thing that she thought was important about her. And she legitimately believed, like many kings of the Middle Ages and stuff like that, that when she died, that she was going to be judged by God on how she ran her Christian nation. And so I think that like we need to have that back. I think like if you get on the jury stand and you lie, like, or not the jury stand, if you get on the stand in a court and you lie, then you should be like, oh, I'm gonna be punished for this by God. And I think we really need to reinterpret that, because that's what keeps us honest. And honestly, that is what happens, even if we don't see it. I've seen that lived out many times. And so whether it's a Quran or a Bible or whatever, I think it's better that at least we bring back this idea that like we are going to be held accountable, instead of just kind of turning it into kind of like a fun thing that you do, when you get sworn into Congress, where you have a Superman comic, because there's nothing actually to like truth, justice, and the American way, I guess. I don't know. So that's what I wanted to talk about when it comes to cultural stuff this week, because I saw that and I went, wow, that's such a good example of where we are in the year of 2023 as a culture when it comes to like swearing oaths that will just be like, I don't know, Barbie is important to me, has a very important place in my childhood, so I'm going to have a Barbie doll. I'm going to swear my oath on a Barbie doll. It's like, there's no way to enforce that. So I just thought that was funny and wanted to talk about it. So I wanted to move on to our theologue question. It's not a theologue. I need to get that word out of my vocabulary here. So I hope this works. No, it didn't work. All right, I'll have to do this. This is like the worst way of transitioning, but it's the best thing I can do. All right, so I got an email with a question, and I still want questions, right? Because the final portion of this thing that I'm doing here is going to be a mailbag. And so this person said, you should do a theologue on legal recreational drug use, such as marijuana, if you haven't already. Now, I think that this person's probably not a long time original viewer of my channel here on the thing, because I very much have done this, but I think it was on illegal drugs and harder ones like cocaine and stuff. I think I got a question on. So I'll do this one in general. Like drug use, like recreational drugs like marijuana and things like that, which is legal in New Jersey. Now, I think, what is it, 2 years ago became legal? I remember it was a referendum on our voting thing. And I think that's really funny, just in hindsight, because like the government in New Jersey, even though I think it got pretty overwhelming support from the populace and even support in the chamber, were unable to pass a bill because kind of Murphy flubbed it. And so they had to get it written into our Constitution. So New Jersey has a right to get blazed now, written in our Constitution, which is embarrassing. I'm going to be honest. It's a little embarrassing. But so when it comes to use of marijuana, though, I think, or any substance, we have biblical precedent to take some things and apply it in other places. So, for instance, like we don't obviously have in the Bible someone talking about drug use in the way that we do today, right? Like, because a lot of the drugs that we use today may have been around. Like, I think marijuana has been cultivated by humans for quite some time, but like other things today, like cocaine and stuff, they didn't have back then. So like we only can go to other biblical principles to pull out teaching on topics like this. So I went to First Peter here, but it's not hard to find stuff against drunkenness, because I figured drunkenness is the best way to start. Like, for instance, if you go here, you'll just see that like it says 100 Bible verses about drunkenness, and so there's tons of stuff here, and it's all talking about different things, and maybe they're not all super related, but there are a lot of things here that it has to do is like that we would associate with it. So I like this one though, because I think this is the best one, because I think this gets at what we need to be careful when we use substances with. So in 1 Peter 5:8-9, it says this. It says, be alert and sober-minded. Your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, looking for someone to devour. Resist him, standing firm in the faith, because you know that the family of believers throughout the world is undergoing the same kind of sufferings. Now, this is talking about persecution, right? The funny thing here is like people will usually look at this and they'll talk about drunkenness, but like if anything, drunkenness is kind of a sober, or is in the background, because he talks about being sober-minded. And this is really just about being the persecution of the church that is going on, and being aware of like how do you of navigating that, right? Not giving into temptations, not falling away from the faith, right? Because the devil is looking to pull people away from Christ. And so Peter is warning people here, and he says sober-minded, and that can be a literal call to be sober-minded, which I'm sure it is, but it's also like very much like keep on guard. That's what it is, right? Be alert and don't be distracted with things. Now, I the reason I chose this verse, because I could have chosen any of these other verses, right? Like you know, I don't know, Proverbs 21:17. Whoever loves pleasure will be a poor man. He who loves wine and oil will not be rich. I don't know. Yeah, there's like all sorts of stuff here where the Bible says like be guarding yourself when it comes to your consumption of things, and don't overindulge. And so I think that's good to know. But the reason I chose this one is because when it comes to use of these substances, we need to see how they impair us. And I think that oftentimes when we overindulge in these things, we lose these two qualities that we are supposed to have, right? We are supposed to be alert, and we are supposed to be sober-minded, because the way that substances work, right? The reason that a lot of humans go to them is because they make us feel good, right? They impair our senses, and that usually helps us to feel better in the moment, right? And that's why they're so like they're so helpful. I mean, how many in the United States recently we've dealt with an epidemic of people who are dying from use of opiates, strong opiates and things like that, right? And it's like, why would you do that? Even, like if it doesn't, if it has such a high chance of mortality, why do people do that? Well, sometimes it's really just to escape, right? To not be alert. Because being alert means being in situations or things like that where you don't want to be. And so that's why like you can kind of see that a lot of drug addiction starts and comes out of things that are really traumatic and things like that. Not all the time, but that's one of the things. I think that like we end up developing these addictions to these substances, and it ends up becoming. And by the way, I know that like I said that, and a lot of people sometimes don't like that, but I do believe that you can be addicted to weed. I've seen it in like 3 of my friends. I know you can. I know that like for a long time, a lot of people who were pushing the legalization of marijuana said you couldn't. I mean like I've seen it just in my life. like 3 of my friends get really and still are really addicted to marijuana. So I think that that's something that'll there. And like, I'm sure it's going to ruin their lungs in 20 or 30 years when we finally probably go through the exact same thing we did with smoking, where we're like, actually, it's kind of bad for you 30 years after people are getting lung cancer and COPD and stuff like that because they've ruined their lungs by, inhaling tons of stuff. So whatever. So the reason we do this though is because, like, as Christians we're called to live in the moment, right? The reason the Bible is so consistent here is because it sees us as primarily not a vehicle for our own self-pleasure, right? Not a vehicle just to experience pleasure in and of ourselves, but rather to serve our neighbors. So the reason that it's important to be sober-minded and be alert is not only because the devil is prowling around, right, and he's looking to pull you away, but if you actually see this is something that Peter directly relates to the family of believers. Resist him, standing firm in the faith, because you know that the family of believers throughout the world is going through the same kind of sufferings. So you are removed out of yourself, right, out of these things that are pretty self-focused, and put in a context where you're thinking about other people. At least that's what Peter does. And I think that that's one of the things where drug use can be really bad, because it ends up like our indulgence, our overindulgence in it can lead us to being out of the loop for other people in our lives, and sometimes even antagonistic towards them. And I've seen this play out in a lot of different ways between people who are pretty heavily into all sorts of different drugs. I mean, like, if you can't hold a conversation with someone, are you loving that person in the moment? No, right? And so that's just like one example of the way that this can be abused. So I wanted to talk about that because I know that that's, this is a fun topic, I guess. I suppose everyone is interested in this now that it's become legal. But that is why you have to be careful with that sort of stuff. All right, well, that is it for today. And I'm excited to start this journey again. Right, look at that. It's 22 minutes, probably 23 by the time I end. And that was like 2 theologues in one. And a lot easier for me to record and film and go through, and is more candid. So I hope you guys like this. And I'm excited to, get on with other stuff that we're going to be doing here. So I will see you guys on Sunday for our church service. We're going to be talking about the difference between raised and resurrected. And I'll see you guys next week for a new thing. So have a good rest of your day, everyone. Peace out.